Okay, so here we are trying to do a test just to see how this is going to look, how this is going to play. Um, so away we go. So this is a test run for Rings with Rich. I have been getting pressure into um, doing my chainmail on a regular basis as a live. So figured go ahead and try to give it a try. I was having some issues with cameras not wanting to behave, but apparently the issue was Chrome. Went ahead and downloaded Opera, installed Opera. It's seen all of my cameras over on Chrome for some reason. No matter what I pick, it kicks back to my document camera, which is the one that's going to be facing down at my work area. So not really that useful. My laptop camera is actually off to my right over here. So you just be seeing my right ear as I'm paying attention to my work. Um, so now we've gotten some of those bugs out of the way. Uh, let's go ahead and start mucking about. So this is not even episode 0. This is episode -1. This is just a test run, proof of concept kind of a thing. But I'll probably start babbling about a lot of the stuff that, one moment, start babbling about a lot of stuff I would probably put into an episode 0 or an episode 1, as far as talking about the very basics of Chainmail. So let's go ahead and um, kick into this. So I've got my work area over here. So the very first thing that you need if you're going to be doing any kind of chainmail is going to be rings and pliers. Um, the very, very basics. That's what you're going to be working with. That's what you're going to be doing everything with. Let's back up for a second and talk about rings. So when people think about chainmail from a historical perspective or an armor perspective or from something that they see in movies or TV, they are not, oh, back here. They're not talking about the type of chain rings that I am working with. So what I am working with is something that is called budded mail. So with this ring right here, you've got this opening, it's spread apart. When you bend them back into place, they're going to look like a smooth ring, like the one that is in my hand. So this is what is called a closed ring because there is no opening. This is an open ring. Now, in actual historical armor, chainmail was a riveted mail. So there was a little hole through both these sides right here. They kind of were actually overlapping and flattened out, and they would be closed up so that they're one on top of the other so that you can get a pin through that hole. And then that pin was smashed flat on both sides to pin it or to basically make it into a rivet so that either side is too wide to slide back through that hole. So that is now joined for good and hopefully forever. So that is riveted mail. So that is the mail that we are actually used to seeing as far as history goes. When it came to much later times and creating jewelry and things of that nature, that's when we are getting into more of the budded mail. Now, there's another kind of mail out there that is called welded mail. or soldered mail in this case. Well, not this case, but where your little split is, and it's not wanting to autofocus. Fine, be that way. But where the split is basically welded shut so that it is one contiguous ring of mail nowadays. So you see that happen sometimes too. When you are talking about your rings, um, there are very important things to take into consideration. First off is um, the first portion of trying to figure out what rings you need or want for a project is something called AR or aspect ratio. Aspect ratio is the inner diameter measurement of the ring divided by the radius of the actual wire itself. So the diameter of the wire itself. So basically, you're trying to figure out what this divided by this is, and then that is going to get you a number. So for instance, the rings that are actually on screen right now are what is called 15 gauge SWG, standard wire gauge. They would be a slightly different wire gauge if you were looking at that from a AWG perspective, American wire gauge. They're 1.5 millimeters for the thickness of the wire, the diameter of the wire, and the inner diameter here is 5/16. So you'd hear someone call these 16 gauge 5/16. These are actually made out of aluminum, and they are called bright aluminum because they're basically bare aluminum, no coloration added, and then they are just shined up, so they are bright aluminum. You'll also be seeing me use what are called anodized aluminum. So that's going to be these colored rings here. And depending on the weave that you're making, so each different thing that you're doing is called a weave. So there's a weave out there called half Persian 3-in-1. That's what these two chains are. Because I hate starting them from scratch. I built these two starter chains so I can just go off of that, because these this weave is a pain in the neck for me to start. And then for some weaves, like half Persian 3-in-1, there are what are called two different leans. So these are right and left leaning. I don't remember off the top of my head which one is the right leaning, which one is the left leaning. Weaves. So we've got that started so that we can go ahead and make it easier for the things that I need to do that start and are going to be using that weave. There's Odin's Eye, which is another one of my current favorites. There's full Persian 6-in-1, which I really enjoy. There's European 4-in-1, which I'll be bringing on screen here in just a couple of minutes. Hell, maybe not even minutes. I'll be bringing those in shortly. There's a ton of different weaves out there, and some of them are very beautiful, and some of them are a major thorn in my side. Just because I am not used to the way that the weave goes, so it's kind of a pain in my ass. The thickness of the wire is going to be the gauge. So again, in this case, these are 16 gauge, and then they're going to be 16 gauge SWG for standard wire gauge instead of AWG for American wire gauge. I don't have the measurement of what 1.5 millimeter is in American wire gauge, or what is closest to an American wire gauge. So with the gauges of wire, whether you're talking American or standard, the higher the gauge number, the thinner the wire. So I'm about to bring on camera as soon as I get the bag open over here. 19 gauge 3/8. So 19 gauge is right here. And then, of course, this is the 16 gauge. So you see the 16 gauge is much thicker than the 19 gauge. And then again, 3/8 is going to be, of course, a bigger inner diameter than 5/16. Close that back up. I have those for a project where I failed to order one of the correct ring sizes. It was really early in the morning when I was mucking about with it. So I clicked on the wire size that was right next to it. So instead of the 3/16, I got the 5/32, which is not going to work. But as I started to talk about before I got distracted, so you're going to be looking at AR, aspect ratio. So aspect ratio is going to determine how they are going to fit together. So you are looking for aspect ratios of certain numbers in order to be able to perform certain weaves. Like a 12 gauge 3/16 or 5/16 is not going to do well if you're trying to do full Persian 6-1. Doesn't work. I tried. Excuse me. 16 1/4 is not going to work. So 16 gauge 1/4 is not going to work for full Persian 6-1. However, 18 gauge 1/4 works perfectly. It's very beautiful. And of course, I don't have any of my crosses handy to show you. Although actually, I do have over here in my starter chains, I should have here it is. So I need to get out of the way. So this is the proper AR and a good AR to do half Persian 6-1 in 16 gauge. That's how it would look in a 16 gauge wire, where this is the 18 gauge and this is 18 1/4. I know because that's normally where I am making full Persian. And then I don't know what the exact inner diameter measurement is on the smallest one right here. That is full Persian done up in a 20 gauge wire. Here's another version of the full Persian done in a two-tone. Looks kind of pretty. I like doing full Persian in two different colors because one, it's striking, and two, it's a lot easier to figure out where you are on it. I'm in the process of actually making starting chains for all the chains that I do. Some of them will actually be used to actually start more stuff because, again, it can be a pain in the keister to go ahead and get that stuff started. But I can also use it as something to hang up if I am doing a show somewhere so that people can see what the various things are going to look like. Because I'll be able to make stuff if what they want isn't something that they're seeing on the table. So I mean, the very basic what you need to do chainmail is a bunch of rings, 2 sets of pliers. I use bent nose pliers because I can use those to get into certain spots and do things when things are particularly tight with an AR. But you could also just use, a straight nose. Now, when you are doing anything as far as chainmail goes, you are going to want smooth, or you're going to want some type of coating or jacket or something like that for your pliers so that you're not scratching everything up, especially if you're doing something in a non-bright um, type of wire. If you're doing something that um, uh, with like the anodized rings like these, since these are starters, I wouldn't care if they got scratched up or whatever. But if these were going to be like everyday wear or something I was making for myself or an interested client or to put on my pet or something like that, then I would want to go ahead and not mar that stuff up. But again, if it's just, again, something I'm practicing with, and I do suggest if you do something like this, if you're just getting started, if you are wanting to make sure that you have stuff that is going to look really, really pretty, you take some of the rings that you get, you put them aside for that type of purpose. You have another set of rings for practice purposes so that if they get bent or scratched or whatever, you are not really out anything. Whereas if you're just going from jump and hitting right into it and doing stuff and you're scratching rings up, you're going to have to pull those out and put them aside. You really do want to go ahead and practice some of these things before you really do a whole heck of a lot. But besides the rings and the pliers, that's all you really have to have. Now, what I do on top of that is, here's another weave. This is called Jen's Pinned Linkage, or JPL. And there's a flavor of this that is a structural weave. But so one thing I do is I get a bunch of little keychain things like that, and I will hook them to the end of my project, and I will take a lanyard. This lanyard is something I got from a convention I went to in October called HoloCon, run by some really great folks down in Dalton, Georgia. It is right around Halloween every year. Go ahead and check out holocon.com. Hollow as in Halloween, con as in convention.com. And you'll be able to see updates about next year's show once they start ever getting everything up on the site. It's a fun time. Very agreeable ticket price, good food. Meals are included with the ticket. And the hotel's a decent, cozy place, and it's everything is right there in the hotel. So the convention, everything right there. So I mean, when you're done with what you want to do, you just saunter back to your room and take a nap or whatever until mealtime or what have you. But it was a fun place. But what I will do is I will go ahead and toss the lanyard over my neck, and as I'm working, if I drop it, I can pick it right back up instead of trying to find it on the floor. So not really needed, but comes in handy. Something else, you've seen me poking at a couple things already with it is I go to Menards or whatever your um, hardware store of choice is, and I get a set of picks. And this helps if you're doing counting of rows or whatever, separating things out, trying to find something that's called an eye. So an eye, when it comes to chainmail, is simply where two rings overlap. So the eye is right in there. Um, so I find that handy. Pens, pencils, and paper are handy for writing down notes of what you're working for or working on, especially if you're leaving out. So you're not done with the pattern. You're working on a pattern that's particularly long. You can write down what row you stopped on, or some coordinates to tell you where you are, so that it's easier to figure out what you're doing. Some weaves are going to require rings of multiple sizes. I was talking about that a little bit earlier, where I accidentally clicked on the wrong thing. I got most of the right rings for one project, but I kind of screwed up and didn't order everything correctly. This is not said project. This is a different project. So I have a drinking horn. The leather strap on my drinking horn broke. So I decided I am going to replace that with a chainmail strap. So in this, we are dealing with two different ring sizes. So the silver rings are a 16 gauge 3/8 ring, and then the blue rings are a 16 gauge 1/4 ring. So sometimes you'll have things of different sizes. I'm almost done with this, and I am happy. Ran out of the 16 gauge 1/4 in the color I was using, so I had to wait for more to get in. They're not quite an exact match, but the vendor I was using kind of ghosted me, and I don't know if they're actually still making product or not, which is a shame. I really enjoyed their stuff. Um, uh, Anyways, back to this. So your AR is going to tell you whether something is going to be suited for a particular weave that you're trying to do. Now, the most common weave that most people think about when they think about chainmail, of course, is the chainmail armor that you're used to seeing in movies and TV shows and stuff like that. And generally, that is normally what is called a European 4-in-1 weave. So this is a small square of European 4-in-1. This is a single unit of European 4-in-1. Let's move this off to the side here for a moment. So what it basically means is that 4 rings are passing through one other ring. That's why it's called 4-in-1. 1, 2, 3, 4 in 1. So one unit is 5 rings. So again, this done up in a sheet is going to look like this. The funny thing is, this is the same thing as this. Again, just done slightly differently. No, fine, be that way. Why did you? Okay, everything's good. So this is just a strip of this. So it's going to look different because of the way everything is set as far as that goes. So if I wanted to do this as like a bracelet or something like that, it is going to look more like this. Although I probably toss one more row this way into it to give it a little bit more stability. All of this is actually the same thing, though, as this. It's just the way that this one's being woven. It's being woven in the round. Now, the reason I bring this up is a couple more things that are handy to have is either paper clips or a twist tie from a loaf of bread or off of a children's toy or something like that that you just got out of the package, or some modern day electronics, or stitch markers, counters, whatever you want to call them, things of that nature, a small piece of wire, a gardening wire, craft wire, whatever, just something that you can actually put through something to give yourself like a little handle while you're doing stuff. Or if you're doing something like the um, round thing that I'm doing here, which is the base and the start of like a dice bag, is when I go to start on my next round, when I add my new link in to go ahead and link a couple of things together. On that ring, I will go ahead and I will put a little stitch marker here. So that as I'm weaving around, I know that when I'm getting over to here, that the number of rings that I put out that should be in that round should be getting close to being done. And then I see that, okay, that's the last bit there. I make my joiner there, and I'm done with that round, and I can go to the next round. Another thing that I do with that is for the dice bag, we create what's called expansions. And actually, with what I have here, the next row that I put on in that circle is going to be an expansion row. So I am going to put one ring in every two rings, and that should be the same amount as the number of rings that I have currently here. And then what I'm going to do is expand it by 8 more. So this should be the level where I think I'm doing 16. So it is going to be every other one will get another ring put on the ring that those are attached to. And then I'll go ahead and instead of 24 to go around all that. And then again, the next one will be 24. And then that will be another expansion row. So there's going to be another 8. So it's going to be, 1, skip 2, 1, skip 2, 1, skip 2, all the way around as far as that dice bag goes. And I think I expand that out to 32 or 40 before at that point I just do just that number for so many more rows. And then I can go ahead and do a decrease of a couple and then create my little tabs. And I don't know where my dice bag actually is at the moment. For me to toss it up here and show people what it is going to look like when it's done. Well, the real episode 0 will have that. Maybe, if I find it. Anyways. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And again, it's finding a weave that you find to be a beautiful weave that you want to work with and you want to work on and attempt, and um, basically, going from there. Now, the basic most weave that you can do is just a simple one-in-one chain. You will see some patterns start off where they're talking about what you want to do is a um, one-in-one chain or a one-in-two chain or something like that. And then you basically just do that. So first thing you want to do when you are working with chainmail is figure out whether you want your rings closed or open. Aha. So right there, you see that there's a slight separation, and that is where we are going to put our pliers on either side of, and we are going to just do a simple twist. We don't want to torque it out. We want to twist it. And for some of the weaves, you are going to actually need to open it a lot more than you think you are. But here we are, we've got that right there. And then again, if we needed it to be closed instead of open, then we just take those two and we go ahead and we so let's put it up nice and tight there. And then what I do is I will usually run my fingers over that join to find kind of that sweet spot, like right there. That's that sweet spot. So I've got my one open, my one open, my one closed, pass my open through my closed, and I can close that off. Or if I'm adding it onto, where'd it go? If I'm adding it onto my one-in-one chain, I just pick an end, put it on, and now that's 2 units longer. Although apparently I did not put it on the very end. Whoops. So just open that back up. Slip it on just right. And then again, close that back up. Now, when I'm closing these up, what I'm also doing is I'm also applying inward pressure so that I can get it as closed and nice as possible. And it's basically figuring out from there again where you want to go. So if I again wanted to do European foreign one, I would open one ring. I would close up 4 rings. And then it's simply the 4 closed, go on the 1 open, and then close that up. There we go. Now, if I wanted to combine this and this, I could easily do that with one ring. So I'd take one open ring and I would make sure that I pass it through these two so that that side is kind of up like that, and then pass these two open pieces through the bottom of this over here. So basically pass this through the top in a downward way so that it's also going down through those two, and then close it up on the other side, and then it would be linked just like these. And it would turn into something like that. Or again, I could also do that going side by side as well. Now, certain weaves, like European foreign one, will also have something that is called a lay. And it is going to be very important when you are looking at that lay on how it's going to look. So it's going to look one way if I hold it as such, and then it's going to look another way if I hold it as such. So you see how the rings kind of space out, where they kind of, if I hold it this way, they kind of drape together. Most patterns that you find out there or you buy are going to talk about this, and they're going to tell you if there's a certain way that things need to be held, certain way that things need to be looked at. So, thank you if you end up watching this later on. Because it doesn't look like anyone's watching right now, which I'm perfectly fine with. Nobody knew I was going to do this. This is, again, kind of a test run kind of a thing. Now, another thing that you might be interested in if you go and start wanting to do stuff like this is I went out and I got myself a digital caliper, a micrometer, micrometer. I will learn how to speak here eventually. It's not like I do it for a living. Spoiler alert, I do. But this is just a simple electronic digital caliper that can measure in inches or can measure in millimeters. And it comes in very handy when I'm trying to figure out if I've got a bunch of rings left over on my table or something like that, or I find rings on the floor. I can take it and I can go, okay, so 1.5 millimeter, I know it's one of my 16 gauge SWG rings. And then what I can do is I can measure the inside with that top portion right there. And it is going to tell me it is currently 10.4 millimeters. However, that's not really the true measurement because it is an open ring, not a closed ring. So it's going to be a little bit more distance between these two than it really should. So I would close this up and then take the measurement from there. But that caliper can be very handy as well. I went out and I bought a bunch of these tubs. They're just regular deli tubs. I got these off of Amazon. I think it was like between 10 and 15 bucks. But what I can do is I can write it on the lid so that I can actually put in here, what's my AR, what is my gauge, what is my measurement. And then over here, I have what the actual millimeter measurement of the wire is, in case I'm looking at something that is in AWG or something that lists what the diameter of the wire is, because some patterns out there that originate from outside of America do not necessarily include the wire gauge. They might say you're using 1.5 millimeter wire and you're using 7.9 millimeter, inner diameter. So I've got all that stuff there. Plus, I can use this to kind of figure out what this is for my AR. Because again, my inner diameter divided by my millimeters. And depending where you are getting your wire from, if you're coiling your wire, if you are buying pre-made rings, where you're getting your rings from, their measurements might be slightly off compared to um, other places. It really depends on their mandrel and stuff like that, but they know that this should be XYZ, so it should be an AR of 3.5 or 5.0 or whatever. And then BA on my thing here just stands for bright aluminum. Whereas if we're looking at these, so these are an AR of 4.0. Again, there's 16 standard wire gauge SWG, 1.5 millimeter wire. They are 1/4 inner diameter, which is going to be roughly 6.4 millimeters. And these are anodized aluminum, AA, and then these are in blue. So these are what I'm using to finish up my Odin's Eye over here. Which, while I was at HoloCon, that convention I was talking about, met a very talented artist. Showed him my proof of concept because we started talking the night before the con began, because I told him how much I hated him because of how much talent he has, and it is unfair for the rest of us. And of course, that came from a complete place of jealousy, and I'm man enough to admit it on the spot, so we became fast friends. But talking to him later on, showed him, because I was talking about the fact that I did chainmail and stuff like that, showed him the proof of concept I was doing, which was roughly 2 inches of this monstrosity. This monstrosity is roughly 50-ish inches long or so. And it might be a little bit smaller by the time it's done, because another thing you will find out as you are doing your weaves is that so here we are. So this is a 2-in-1 chain. So this is the start of how that chain is going to go. As I am adding in the additional 2 round rings to capture the center ring, and then these cross pieces, it is going to tighten things up so that they're not quite as spread out. So I might need to add a couple more inches onto the end. We'll see when we finally get there. Oh, hey, there's one of the rings I dropped. And that was true. But he saw that and he liked it, and he commissioned a bracelet out of the Odin Eye, which luckily I had the colors and everything I needed to make his right there on the spot. So I felt really good. I sold my first commission to somebody who didn't really know me too much from Adam. I was happy. Um, uh, that is it for this test. It's I need to blame the folks over at ndcd.org, because it is way too much fun to be a .com, for pressuring me into completing what I needed to complete to be able to do something like this, and then start doing something like this on air as a at least semi-regular show, if not regular. But like to also thank the folks over at Sisters of the Hook for agreeing with them that I needed to start showing off my stuff. Um, uh, of course, I can't do any of this without the love, assistance, and tolerance of my beautiful, loving wife, Misty. No, she is not um, holding me hostage in the background, anything like that. Um, but yeah, I've got a completely amazing wife that indulges me in my falling down rabbit holes and spending hours, if not days, researching various weaves, practicing various weaves, and buying a crap ton of inventory of raw rings so I can actually make finished products. Um, I really lucked out having someone that is that indulgent of me. Um, I want to thank Chainmail Joe and the Ring Lord. They are not um, in any way, shape, and or form um, currently um, any kind of sponsor or anything like that. But 99% of the rings I get will either be from Chainmail Joe or the Ring Lord. Occasionally, Metal Designs. Metal Designs usually doesn't deal in the sizes I'm looking for certain rings. So, or at least the last time I looked at them, they might have added more to their inventory. I do have some stuff from Metal Designs. It is completely awesome. It is beautiful. I've bought some patterns from them. Um, but again, it's just uh, the um, things I will be making that are based off of designs from Brilliant Twisted Skulls. They do all of their stuff with the Ring Lord's rings, so I'm probably going to gravitate more towards the Ring Lord for anything I'm doing off of them, just because it's what they use to build everything. And everyone's mandrels are slightly different because of wear and time and things of that nature. It's the rings will be slightly different sizes. It's also going to be heat and other things like that, and that will affect the size because metal will expand and contract with heat. Um, but it's yeah, they're both really really great companies to work with. Um, So the Ring Lord and again Chainmail Joe are the two companies I deal with most. Third place would be Metal Designs, as far as where I'm actually getting my links from. And again, like I said, I get deli tubs from Amazon. Uh, and the reason I was putting my rings in um, medication bottles that are properly, washed and cleaned and everything after I am done taking my medications. Actually, this one I didn't have to because this is from one of my injectables. So everything that was in here was a small glass vial to begin with. So there was nothing to clean out on this one. But anyways, I was storing them like this, but it gets kind of hard to keep track of what's in what, where now with the deli tubs, I can put all my 16 gauge in a pile. Um, hey Joe, reason you didn't see the notification is because I just got froggy and decided to do a test. So this wasn't anything planned. Um, this was just me testing to see if everything is going to work and behave. Apparently, my problem was Chrome. Running StreamYard through Opera, I get all my cameras. Running StreamYard through Chrome, just giving me just this camera here. So um, I'm treating it as if it were a episode 0 and just rambling on top of it. But yeah, it looks like things are getting ready, and now I've just got to build my cards and a few other things um, to go ahead and properly fix this up. Plus, I figured, what the hell, I would see what a permanent studio is going to look like, um, uh, so that this one will end up having just the permalink that if folks have the link to it, they can just pop in whenever the hell they want. Which again, doing it this way, I'm assuming Joe Dog and Dan should have that same capability. And in this way, they don't have to keep rebuilding links every week. They can just go into the studio, and prep it and shoot it for, and get it ready for when they're actually going to, excuse me, uh, put it out there for their appropriate times. But if everyone's got a link for Super O'Clock, they can just come in and not have to get that link sent to them every week, like we have been doing. Oh, one other thing I did forget to talk about real quick. So what did I do with it? It is over here. So one other thing is, if you are going to do a dice bag, if you are going to do a dice bag, like I've been doing, um, have yourself a pen that has a little bit thicker of a clicker. And what you can do is you can set that on top so that if you do drop it, you can set it like that and then spin it around, and then you'll see what row's hanging down to know where you have dropped off if you drop your work. Again, I drop my work all the time due to neuropathy and other neurological issues. So that is one thing I always do, is make sure that if I drop my work, I can easily figure out what the hell I'm doing, so I don't rage quit and fling it across the room and then have to find it in a pile of boxes behind me. Because I will admit, I am a 51-year-old toddler. Where was I? But again, yeah, great suppliers through again, Metal Designs, um, uh, Chainmail Joe, and the Ring Lord. Again, I'm not sponsored by anyone in any way, shape, and or form, at least not as of yet, and who the hell knows, probably never. And I'm fine with that. And if someone decides to sling some sponsorship money my way, hey, $20 is $20. I'm not too big of a man to whore myself out for a decent company that's willing to spend money on me. But I am on the tail end here. I am, again, this was just a test run. I am almost an hour into the test run. Everything seems to have been behaving so far. Everything's playing nice as far as both YouTube and StreamYard, especially using it here in Opera. So the very first thing I have done in Opera is muck about with StreamYard. So yeah, I just gotta build my title cards and all that happiness. I already have a crap ton of stuff already in my brand, so I don't have to remake the wheel on that. I just have to put my Rings with Rich stuff in there, and we're good to go. So, for those that have joined me, thank you very much. For those that watch it in the rerun, thank you very much as well. Um, remember, folks, if you can't be good at it. Um, I wish everyone love, laughter, light, happiness, and hope. I even wish that to the assholes out there in the world because, as a great man once said, well, it didn't once say, he said it all the fucking time. Love breeds love, hate breeds hate. Um, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. Make everything a little happier, a little brighter. You know, uh, like my grandma used to say, try to bring a smile to everyone that you can around you. It's never the wrong color. It's never the wrong size. It's never the wrong style. And for one brief moment, you've brightened somebody's life. And to me, that is one of the greatest pleasures I can have on this world is making someone's life a little bit better. If I can't be a shining, guiding light, um, at least I can be a trippy rave strobe in the background, to at least get someone a couple inches more down the path. I love you all. Thank you very much for indulging me in this test run. See you guys on the other side. Take a look. Hasta la bye bye.